This video demonstrates knitting the back piece of the tiny cardigan. And similar to the sleeve, it's important to remember that this video will not match the shaping cadence of your written instruction. Follow your written instructions. Begin by casting on a waste yarn start in 1x1 rib, following all the same procedures as you did for the sleeve. Make sure that when you hang the comb, it's balanced. And remember that it does not matter if the waste yarn start has a finished, closed, cast on edge work with tubular rows. It's a temporary section of knitting that will be removed later when you take out the draw thread. Knit about 10 to 15 rows or 1 inch or so of waste yarn. Knit in the tubular or circular course of draw thread, again using all the same procedure as you had for the sleeve. Set both carriages to knit plain at tension 0, 0. Pick up the main yarn and knit the zigzag row. Work one tubular or circular course, which is 2 passes of the carriage, by setting opposing part cams and increasing the tension to 1, 1. After the tubular or circular course, increase the tension by 1 whole number, so 2, 2, and knit the first row of the rib and reset your row counter. I failed to reset the row counter before I knit this first row after the tubular course, so I've set it to 1 instead of 0, 0, 0. After this row, increase the tension on both carriages by 1 whole number each row until you reach main tension. Then continue knitting the rib welt as specified by your written instructions. After knitting the ribbing, set the carriage to knit half fisherman's rib, which will tuck in one direction only on the river bed. You'll notice here that the river bed will start to collect floats on top of stitches from the row below, and this is what makes that tucked rib or full half fisherman's rib knit structure. You'll continue knitting up until the armhole, so the entire side seam. You may want to begin hanging edge weights using the 7 wires and the small barrel weights, as your knitting will reduce in width slightly as you knit length. These edge weights will be critical in ensuring that the edges of your work knit cleanly. Once you reach the armhole, you'll bind off a series of stitches to start the armhole shaping. Here I'm moving two end needles from the riverbed to the main bed so that I have 4 adjacent needles to bind off. Again, follow your written instructions. It may be more or less depending on the gauge you achieved when swatching. Use the latch tool to bind off around the gate pegs and hang the loop after binding off, in this example, the 4th needle onto the new edge needle on the main bed. Pull this new edge needle all the way to hold so that when you peel the work off the gate pegs, you don't inadvertently pull that last loop off of the needle and create a run. Because we need the working yarn to bind off more than 1 stitch at a time or decrease 1 stitch at a time, either the left or the right hand side of your work will be a tucked row on the riverbed. Move the stitch and the tucked float from the riverbed to the main bed and bind off through both of those loops as though they didn't exist. Continue shaping the armhole by working double decreases as outlined in your written instructions. After you've worked the double decreases to articulate the armhole shaping, you'll knit straight up until you begin shoulder slope shaping. Once you begin working the shaping or the decreases for the shoulder slope, we'll want to hang some yarn markers in the edge stitches of the work so that we have a frame of reference for when we join the front shoulder to the back shoulder. Because this cardigan has a shoulder seam that's pushed towards the back, all of the shaping for the shoulder slope is worked on this back piece. There is no slope or shaping on the front portion of the cardigan. To ensure that we don't join these two pieces too far down the armhole, we'll hang a few stitch markers so that when linking, we'll be able to match the front shoulder width to the back shoulder width. Using a contrasting color, or in this example, my waste yarn, I'll draw a loop through the edge stitch. It's really between the two edge stitches on the main bed, and tie a large loop with a double knot and pull that loop in between the beds. I'll hang a clothespin on it just to keep it secure and hanging straight down out of the way so I don't disrupt the knitting. At this point, I'll continue to work the back shoulder slope shaping per my written instructions. Pay close attention as you're knitting. You might see me manually knit the end stitch, which has come unknit as I've been transferring to work the decreases. Be really mindful of what your knitting looks like in that sliver of a gap you can see between the two beds, as this is your kind of one and only chance to spot and correct any issues. here I've accidentally dropped a stitch. If this happens while you're binding off, don't panic. The first thing to do is to triage a bit, secure the loop that you've been binding off with. You've been working a chain stitch. If this gets pulled through, everything before it will unravel. When reforming in half fisherman's rib using the latch tool, you've got to pick up every other float to maintain the knit structure. It's also a good idea to take any weight you might have off of the knitting so that the run doesn't get worse. Do your best to fix any problems that arise. Sometimes off the machine there's a few things that we can do to help improve some of these errors in the knit structure.